Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. My name is Brandy and this week we are working on this piece that's behind me. So as you can see, it's a bed frame, and this piece was kind of different because it's got caning on it, and the caning meant that I knew right away I needed to spray these pieces because I didn't want to gum up all the detail work of the caning by brushing on them. So we're going to do some spraying this week, and although this looks like a clean white finish, we're actually going to antique it a little bit with some glazing. You're going to really see the details on this and how this bed comes together, but it's a huge transformation from where it started. I think it's going to be beautiful and classic for my customer that she can use in her home. And I'll show you how to paint caning and then how to go about spraying too. We're going to go into some detail on the sprayer. So stick around. Let's transform this bed frame. Let's get started. Here's where I started on this caning bed brought to me by a customer. It started out in this old dated brown finish, and the problem with this existing finish is it had a lot of damage to it. Most of the old clear coat was chipping and peeling off of the bed. So I started off with my Surf Prep sander. I put on a mask for this one because a lot of that chipping and peeling old finish wanted to pop off while I was sanding over the top of it and fly into my face, which was kind of gross. My sander is hooked to a vacuum, so while I'm going over the top of it, it is vacuuming all those loose bits up, and I just started with a sanding sponge and went over the top of the entire bed. My Surf Prep sander got away a lot of that old finish, but I still had quite a bit I had to get to that was stuck inside of all the crevices of that caning. Up close here, you can see a little bit better some of those dark spots versus the light that I've already sanded over. You can see where I've got that old finish that's still left. So next I came back with a nylon brush and I brushed over the top of all of the caning, and this helped really get some of those old bits loose that were still stuck in this weaving. While I was scrubbing over the caning, I went ahead and gave this a good cleaning as well so that it was getting cleaned and rid of that old finish at the same time. One thing you can't tell very well just by looking at this on camera is that this caning actually has two layers. So it's got the one that I'm working on here, but then when you flip the bed around, it's also got another layer of caning that backs up to it. So everything that I did to prepare this for paint, I had to do it ×4. It was quite a bit of work to get this one ready. This cleaning and removal of that old finish was a really important step because you never want to lay new product on top of your old finish if it's got existing damage, because it'll have a tendency to chip and peel away the new finish with anything underneath unless I remove all those old bits. With my bed fully prepped, nice and clean, and all that finish removed, I'm ready to go ahead and start spraying some product on. Now I'm going to go ahead and prime this, and I'm using Wiseout primer in white. I'm spraying it with my Apollo sprayer. Anytime I'm going to go from a dark finish to white, I always make sure that I use a primer. This is going to make sure that my white doesn't discolor over time, and I get a nice consistent finish. It's actually going to save me on coats of paint. I won't bore you with a lot of spraying because this was a lot of spraying and it was all in white, and so it's hard to tell the difference, but I sprayed 2 coats of my primer in white and then 2 coats of my paint over top. This bed has a headboard, a footboard, and then 2 rails, so I had to do all those coats of primer and paint on front and back of each one. There was a lot of spraying in this project. Once I had my 2 coats of paint over top, I'm ready to go ahead and start laying on some glaze. Now you want to make sure that either your paint has a built-in top coat or that you've sealed it before you start putting dark glaze over a white paint. And the reason is because some paints can be porous and they will have a tendency to absorb that glaze. And I want to be able to wipe it back to just leave some nice, clean, crisp details. And if my paint is not sealed or doesn't have a built-in top coat, then I'll have a hard time wiping that glaze back. I start out by brushing my antiquing glaze over the top of this medallion, and I'm going to dig it into all those crevices. And I'm just going to let it sit for a second while it sets up a little bit. I'm going to come back with a dry rag first, and I'm going to use that dry rag on my finger, and I'm just going to wipe away as much excess as I can possibly get. But this still leaves a little bit of a dingy look over top. So next I'm going to come back with a wet wipe, and I'm going to wipe over top with the wet wipe. With my wet or my dry rag, I continuously move it to a new clean part of the rag because you don't want to keep wiping the dirty portion over the top. You'll just keep spreading your glaze and get really frustrated. So I do keep moving my rag around my hand so I'm always working with a clean portion. For your wet wipes, baby wipes work really well for this. I am using just Costco cleaning wipes here. I actually really like those. They get away the excess glaze really well. I went through about a half a pack on this project because there was so much glazing, it took quite a bit of wipes. With glaze, you can wipe away as little or as much as you like to leave as much over the top as you want. Because this is white, I didn't want it to look overly dingy, so I wanted to wipe away as much as possible. So I wiped away anything that wasn't sitting in the lowermost crevices. This is a fairly tedious process. It's a lot of putting it on and wiping it back away, and this bed had a lot of glazing. Every side had a medallion, so this is on the bottom side of the headboard and the footboard. Both had this medallion. There's another one on the top of each piece. The legs had some detail work on it, so there was a lot of glaze work on this project. Glazing like this is probably one of my least favorite projects to do, and that's just because it's a lot of putting it off and taking it off. It's basically that you have to do a lot of cleaning. So for this project was a lot of cleaning, both to get the bed ready for the paint and then also cleaning off all this extra glaze. A lot of cleaning this week. I frequently get asked why I choose to use dark wax versus dark glaze. The reason I chose dark glaze in this is because I wanted it to have very clean, crisp details. I choose waxes usually when I want that smeary, smudgy, a little more ethereal effect. In this case, I wanted them to be clean and crisp and dark in those lowermost points, and glaze is the perfect product for that. The other big difference between dark glaze and dark wax is usually dark waxes are oil-based and dark glaze is water-based. So when I'm wiping this back, it cleans up really easy. If you want to wipe back a dark wax, you usually need an oil-based product because oil-based removes oil base. So here with my water-based glaze, I'm able to put it on and then wipe it back really easily because it's just water-based, which basically means it cleans up with soap and water. That's usually the easiest way to tell whether your product is oil-based or water-based is what do you need to clean it up with. If you read on the package and it says you need some kind of solvent, that's generally an oil-based product. If it says it cleans up with soap and water, you've got a water-based product. For putting my glaze on these large medallions, I used a slightly larger artist brush to brush it in all the details. And then on those really fine crevices that go along the edge of the bed, I used a smaller artist brush and just brushed it into that crevice. The reason I did it that way is because I actually want as little glaze that I have to wipe away as possible. So I'd like to try to get it into the area that I want it in and keep it in there. Let's move on to the legs on this bed. This is one of my last areas that I glazed, and I'm going to go around all this medallion that's on these legs, and then of course the feet as well. I will say, as tedious as this work was, it really brought a lot to the finish. Otherwise, it was just a plain white finish and you didn't notice all these details that the bed had. But once I added the glaze, it really brought out all those medallions. This gave a lot of interest to my final finish so that you could see how detailed and intricate this bed really was. Now this bed did have kind of an aged finish when I started with it, which meant it had some of those pock marks in it, and I went ahead and left those. It was just part of the character of this old bed, and I thought it went great, and all those little marks picked up this dark glaze as well. Let's go ahead and turn on some music and finish up this glazing. We're almost done. I can see the tail end of this project. With all of my glaze work finally done on this piece, I went ahead and sprayed it with 2 coats of clear coat to protect all the glazing and the paint. My final step in setting off all this detail work is going to be to add a little bit of gold gilding wax. This is from Redesign with Prima. The color is called Eternal, and I'm just going to apply it with my fingers. I start on the outer edges of the medallions and I pull them inward, and it creates this soft effect on all of the detail work. With my main paint color, the dark glaze down in the recesses, and then this gold gilding wax on all my high points, all this detail work has 3 layers that really gives it some depth and dimension and makes them pop against the body. With those touches complete, it's time to take my final photos. I went ahead and staged this as a bed, made it up with some bedding, and then I also just took photos of the pieces on their own as well, so you can really see how this would look once it's completed and set up in a room. You guys can find links for everything I use in the description for this video. You can find more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushbybrandy.com. I hope you'll click that subscribe button for a weekly tutorial here on YouTube.